What is up, everyone? It is Owen Richard. Welcome back to the channel after such a long time. In today's video, I thought I'd go over my top 10 comics of all time. This is in no necessary order, as also not a definitive list for me. I feel like anyone who reads comics or watches movies or plays games, these top tens are always really hard to narrow down, and there's probably, you know, going to change over time. It probably also changes depending on what mood I am in. This list is also subjectional. To me, I kind of did it based off of I feel like what was most influential to my joy of comics, because it was quite hard to pick top 10. Um, there's so many great comics that I've read that it was hard to pick. Also, this video is inspired by the Speed Sultan. He recently did a his top 10 comics video. So I thought I'd give it a go at doing my top 10. So if you watch this, make sure to go back and watch his original video that this is inspired by. Check him out. He's really cool YouTube comic book creator. So yeah, definitely worth checking out. Anyway, without further ado, let's get into it. So first up, I have Batman Hush by Jeff Loeb and Jim Lee. I feel like Jim Lee is kind of one of the definitive Batman artists. If you tell me to think of most of the Batman characters, Jim Lee is kind of the designs that I think of first. I know a lot of people recently have think this is kind of overrated, but I think it does a good job at sort of introducing you to all the sort of main Batman characters in one book. And I think also is this kind of influential to me because it's sort of one of the first, not the first comic, but it's one of the earliest comics I read when I was getting into comics. And so I have very fond thoughts about it. Next up, I have to show you this one on my iPad because I don't actually have physical copy of it, but we have Ultimate Spider-Man, the original Ultimate Spider-Man by Brian Michael Bendis and Mark Bagley. This, I've only 25 issues into it, but it is such a good series, and it's just a fun, it was kind of back before putting Peter in high school was kind of a wee bit overdone, but this has kind of really modernized a lot of what we know about Spider-Man and really defined a lot about the character. And there's just certain aspects of the characters that are the definitive versions of characters in my head. Some of those ideas come from this series. But yeah, super great series. Also, spoiler alert, not the only time Spider-Man will be on this list. Next up, we have Transformers Volume 1 by Daniel Warren Johnson. This is just such a great book. I remember I've seen a few panels and TikToks and stuff of it online, but the art in it is just like absolutely incredible. I'm trying to see like a good panel to like to show you. That isn't like majorly spoilery. I mean, there's like just tons of great stuff in it. I could really just show you anything. But I love that it kind of redefines the classic 80s cartoon. It kind of, you know, goes back to that like 80s cartoon and kind of goes, how can we retell this story differently? You know, characters are getting sort of killed off left, right, and center, like it's Game of Thrones. There's changes in like power dynamics. You know, Megatron isn't the leader of Decepticons. There's certain Autobots that like have been integral to so many other stories but aren't in this one. And it's just a really heartfelt retelling of the classic 80s Transformers. But yeah, Transformers Daniel Warren Johnson. Next up, we have Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow by Tom King and Bilquis Evely, with colors by Mateus Lopez. This is such a great book. The art in it is just like absolutely, you know, incredible. But I highly recommend this. This is about, you know, dealing with grief and revenge, but also love and kindness and persevering. And it is just such a beautiful book. Bilquis Evely's art with Mateus Lopez's colors is just exquisite. And I'm quite excited to see what they do with the film coming out next year. As this is a very like cinematic looking book. And it's also, I feel like, a more intimate take on Supergirl. You know, a lot of people are kind of used to the sort of CW version, which is kind of very happy-go-lucky, where like this very much deals with the tragic side of Supergirl and her grief of being like one of the last surviving Krypton. But like, unlike her cousin Superman, she actually like grew up on Krypton before it exploded, and so she remembers her home. And it's just really interesting in exploring that. Next up, we have The Marvels by Kurt Busiek and Alex Ross. First of all, you have Alex Ross's artwork in this book, which is just absolutely fantastic as always. But I love this as a simple retelling of all the iconic Marvel stories throughout the decades, all the way back from the 1940s right up to I believe the 90s, or 80s, I suppose. And yeah, it is just beautifully drawn. It is retelling of all those iconic stories, but from the point of view of the civilians looking up at all these superhero battles. Sort of one civilian in particular who's this kind of like photographer, and he's kind of, the whole thing is he's like making a book and he's like taking these pictures, so you see that's him there, and he's like looking up at all these, you know, battles and stuff going on and events, and he's like taking pictures. But yeah, Marvel's absolutely brilliant book. Next up, we have The Moon is Following Us, another Daniel Warren Johnson book. By Daniel Warren Johnson, Riley Rosmo on art, with Mike Spicer on colors, and this is yet another great book by Daniel Warren Johnson that deals with grief and tragedy and loss, and how your children see grief differently to how your parents see grief, and it's just a magical sort of fantasy sci-fi dealing with all those like emotions. I'm only 7 issues out of 10 issues in, so I haven't like finished it, but already it's one of my top 10 favorite books. Next up we have Flash Rebirth by Joshua Williamson. I only have the first 4 volumes of this. I'm also missing the Button story, so it kind of weird because there's a jump between volume 3 and volume 4 that kind of is like the Button story arc. So hopefully I get that at some point. But once again, this was kind of when I was getting into comics. I'd watched the Flash TV show, and so I decided, I want to read some Flash. And this does a good job at, again, introducing you to all the characters of Flash: Barry Allen, Iris, Wally West, Wallace West, Reverse Flash, all the rogues, and this great Flash book. If you're getting into Flash, I highly recommend this. Next up, we have the Fantastic Four by Lee and Kirby. That's it there. This is very Silver Age, very G. Whittaker's, but I kind of love Jack Kirby's art in this is absolutely incredible, especially how he draws the Thing. He almost makes the Thing almost like a self-insert character. But yeah, his art in this, the artistic storytelling of Jack Kirby is absolutely incredible. And y'all should look up some Jack Kirby books to read, because even just look up interviews with Jack Kirby, because he's really profound on like, how he sort of came up with stuff. But yeah, I also have this on my list because also again, when I was getting into comics, the first like 10 issues were like some of the first stuff I read. They had like an old Marvel app, and it was like they had a Father's Day sale where you can get each issue for like 99 cents. So I bought like the first 10. And I read it and I loved it. Even though the writing is very of its time, the art is just absolutely incredible. And it does get better, I feel like, as it goes on. But yeah. Next up, we have Batman Court of Owls, City of Owls, a classic Batman story by Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo. This is another one that sort of got me into comics early on. And it is just a great storyline. It has one of my favorite moments where the Court of Owls, they've like broken into Wayne Manor, and they're trying to break into the Batcave, and then all of a sudden Batman bursts through the doors of the Batcave in his like big mech armor. He's like, "Get the hell out of my house!" But yeah, Scott Snyder, Greg Capullo, Batman, Court of Owls, City of Owls, or the other way around, Court of Owls, City of Owls. I also just love the Batman costume in the New 52. But yeah, great story. Also, if you're a fan of Hush, this also has a twist that kind of, I feel like, gets done a little bit better probably than the Hush twist. It has that same mystery of like mysterious figure shows up. Who is this mysterious figure? Of Lincoln March. But yeah, great story overall. Highly recommend it. And then, last but not least, I'm a Spider-Man guy. Amazing Spider-Man Volume 1 by multiple writers and artists. Stan Lee, Steve Ditko will start it all. And then you got John Romita Sr., Jerry Conway, a bunch of other people. But obviously, again, very Silver Age. But then as you get into it, you get into like the drama of, Peter and Betty Brant's relationship. And then, you get Gwen Stacy and Mary Jane. You get Harry Osborn, Norman Osborn, all that drama. And it's just one of the better written Silver Age books, in my opinion, out of what I've read from the Silver Age. And also, like, during a time where Marvel were kind of like, they're making it more about the person under the mask than a mask itself. So it's as much about Peter as it is about Spider-Man. And yeah, some of my earliest memories from reading comics is The Amazing Spider-Man Volume 1. That goes from like 1962, I believe. Yeah, 1962 to I think 1998. But it is just amazing. I've read it sporadically. I haven't read like the whole way from 1962 to 1961, but everything I have read is just, well, amazing. They don't call it Amazing Spider-Man for nothing. But yeah, highly recommend it. Anyway, that is my top 10. There's definitely, honorable mentions that like I have to sort of level down, like Watchmen by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons. We've got Something's Killing the Children, Walking Dead, Beneath the Trees Where No One Sees is a series I read recently, which is quite good. There's so many. But anyway, that will do it for my top 10 list. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.